The petrodollar is actually a device invented by Kissinger and Nixon.
The standard of living of all Americans can be traced back to here, the vast oil-rich deserts of Saudi Arabia.
In the early 70s, after the Arab crisis happened with the oil embargoes, OPEC basically tripled the price of oil to the Western world. And at that time, America realized that they were vulnerable because they were importing about 70% of all the oil they consumed.
To secure a reliable foreign source of oil, U.S. President Richard Nixon sent his Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger to Saudi Arabia for a secret meeting. The result was a pact that still stands to this day.
If Saudi Arabia, which at the time was the world's largest producer of oil, would sell the oil in US dollars, America would defend Saudi Arabia and make sure the House Assad would stay in power.
As a direct result of this U.S.-Saudi agreement, all other oil-producing nations also adopted the dollar as the de facto medium of exchange. Demand for it increased exponentially all over the world, and soon it had a new name, the petrodollar.
Your currency is only as strong as the demand for it, just like anything else, the supply and demand. Why the petrodollar is important, it causes a demand for the US dollar. A lot of Americans don't realize that over 70% of all the $100 bills in the world are actually outside of the US. There's more $100 bills in Russia than there are in America.
This stockpile of US dollars in countries around the world is because oil is bought and sold using the greenback.
If oil starts trading in non-petrodollars, such as gold or a basket of currencies, or if China and Russia start trading in yuan and ruble rather than US dollars, that demand isn't there. And the way of life for the average American will be done. It will be worse than the Great Depression.
Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. So the United Arab Emirates, otherwise known as Dubai, and Saudi Arabia, they're saying, we're no longer using the U.S. dollar. And on January 1st, BRICS is going to expand. So you're going to have Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and 6 other nations teaming up to no longer use the U.S. dollar, which means that more countries will not be using the U.S. dollar to buy and sell oil than will be using the U.S. dollar. And here to talk about it is Polny. Welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
God bless both of you. Thank you for having me back, Clay. Marty, good to see you too. God bless. All right. Exciting times.
Marty and I are going to interrupt you as you present, but Marty and I will be skeptics.
Absolutely.
We shall attack you personally and professionally.
Beautiful. You know, it's always good to have a challenge. Well, let's start off with what you just said. Okay, so all of these things you're just referencing, right? Marty, for scripturally, right? When the enemy comes in like a flood, the Lord will raise up a standard against them. Scripture, okay? It is written. So everything they're coming in with, that's the flood. And then the Lord will raise up a standard against them. Now, you talk about the U.S. dollar, Clay. Point number 2. Let's talk about how they built Babylon. Babylon the Great, okay? How it started was, when you read Jeremiah, it was a golden cup in the Lord's hand. But then the golden cup got perverted, demented, got drunk, right? And so what ended up happening, the world got drunk with the US dollar. And so what's happened is this money system has now circulated the globe, and it all started with who? Nixon. He took us off the gold standard in 71. It was in 73 that they created the petrodollar. Coincidentally, didn't, what's his name, just die? Kissinger? Wasn't he the orchestrator of that? What a coincidence. 50 years to the exact mark. He died relative to what he created.
You mentioned, David, Henry Kissinger, and I think he first was noticed by the Rockefeller family after he wrote a very erudite work on nuclear weapons and nuclear war back in the late 1950s.
Nuclear weapons and foreign policy.
Right.
Yes.
It's been published, and from that time on, he became pretty close to the Rockefeller family.
Well, he did. Actually, I guess I was the first one who got to know him because he was a member of an organization called the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, and there was a study group at that time that he, as then a young instructor at Harvard, presided at. I was so impressed by him that I introduced him to my brother Nelson, who was then governor of New York and was then considering seeking the presidency of the United States. They became great friends, and actually Henry became Nelson's foreign policy advisor as long as he was in public life, and I think is one of the remarkable international statesmen in the world today. Even 30 years after he was Secretary of State, he is still asked by heads of state when he travels the world for his advice.
Let me go back to the time you said when you came here, it transformed your life. Was there a course, a professor who really made that difference for you?
Yes, there was one seminar of Henry Kissinger, which really opened my eyes. I wasn't accepted to the seminar, but I sat in. I think he let me in because I was German.
Kissinger, that's the guy who told Nixon to get off the gold standard. He's also the guy who told Klaus Schwab to start the World Economic Forum. He just died. We're on the same page. Now, within a day of that time, Charlie Munger, who's the top financial advisor for Warren Buffett, he died. So the two men most responsible for the U.S. China policy over the past 50 years, they both died within a day of each other.
Wow.
Now, in your world at Loudmouth Prayer, you teach people how to pray. That's what you do, loudmouthprayer.com.
Yes, sir.
Do you talk about Kissinger? Do you talk about Charlie Munger in your prayer groups? Do you do that?
No, sir, we do not.
Do you have any follow-up question for Bo before we move on? I want to make sure that you give him that loudmouthprayer.com interrogation that only you can do.
Bo, can you back all this up in Greek and Hebrew?
How about scripture? Let's throw some Leviticus at you. Okay, so what does Leviticus say? Thou shalt consecrate the what year, Marty? 50th year.
Jubilee.
And proclaim what?
Freedom.
Liberty throughout the land.
Oh, wow.
And to all of its inhabitants. Just a coincidence, Kissinger died 50 years to the mark of what he created. You see, all of this is not political. It's biblical. See, we are living in biblical times. So remember that, the screen that I shared with you a while ago, Clay. So the world itself, everything going on around us is biblical. We're in the seals of Revelation. So let me ask you a question. We talked, the reason you started the tour was because of the first seal, Corona. Then peace was taken from the earth. And now all of these seals are worldwide phenomenon. They're worldwide events. So now we're stepping into what? The greatest financial event in human history. So you talk about the US dollar. So right here, this is, Marty, scriptures, right? Daniel 2. This is a Daniel 2 prophecy. This is crazy because this prophecy is 2,500 years old and it hasn't skipped a beat. We have seen Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, the papacy, United States. We've seen it all. What's missing is the last piece. And what's the last piece? It's right here. It's Daniel 2, verse 34. While you were watching, a stone cut out by what? So first off, while you were watching, so we get to watch this go down. A stone cut out by no human hand means what? By the hand of God. So Marty, let me ask you a question. Whose battle was it at the Red Sea? Moses's or God's? At the Red Sea, whose battle was it?
Oh, it was God's battle. Yeah.
That's right. Okay. So Daniel 2, verse 34, while you were watching, a stone carved out by no human hand. That means what's going on in the world right now is God's battle. So what did Moses say to the Israelites? Stand still and watch the salvation of the Lord, for he will work for you, for us today. For the present day Egyptians, who you've seen before you, who are bringing all these things in that Clay just referenced at the beginning of this interview, soon you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. So we are stepping into the third seal. Now, Clay, confirm that we have talked about this. This is the slide that I showed you, except I made this for you, Clay, because I know you're a facts guy. And I want to show facts when I speak with Clay, because Clay, if it's not factual, if you can't prove it, you can't see it, it doesn't exist. I love that about Clay, because he wants, he proves, he's shown everything about the World Economic Forum we're doing. He wrote the Great Reset book. Clay loves facts. So Clay, you know that I showed you this chart in September and October. And the chart here was a historic cycle, was a private cycle that God showed me on the pressure, on the movement that the US dollar is going to do. And then the cycle right in the middle here is the US dollar. And then for you, Clay, I just added this in about an hour, not even 15 minutes ago, before we jumped on the internet, before we jumped on this podcast. I added gold in for you here. Now I want you to look at this just so you see, because
real quick. So
Babylon.
Sorry, just real quick. Go back to the chart, please. You did say on our show gold would hit a historic high.
Go ahead. So okay.
That just happened Friday. Gold approached the all-time historic high.
What's your sense on where we're heading from here?
We are heading much higher from here. We have been bullish, and we continue to remain bullish on the outlook of gold. One of the reason the kind of rally what we saw is the expectation that the rate hike cycle is over in US, Europe, in most part of the world. Even though they keep saying that we will hike if necessary, I don't think so there's going to be any hike. It is impossible for the Western central bankers to hike the rates from here, because if that happens, they are not going to service their debt, because the bond yields are going to shoot up. So whatever tightening they are doing parallelly by selling their bonds in the market, they cannot serve the purpose. So rate hike is over. And we are going to see gradually, once the economy slows down, which you are seeing in the data from last 15, 20 days, if this continues, there is a possibility of rate cut in April or May 2024. This is very bullish news for gold, because on account of higher rates, interest rate, ETF have been the next seller in the gold market. From last 7 months, ETFs are selling gold globally. I'm not talking about India, but globally there has been a redemption in the gold ETF holding. And just imagine in a tight market like this, where the central banks are buying on an average 500 tons of gold than what they used to buy. And now the ETFs, the international investors are going to jump in once the rate hike cycle peaks and the interest rate starts to go down. I think there is going to be a significant surge in the global gold ETF holding from here. So the case is pretty strong. Gold prices are heading towards $2,400 on CME, 70,000 in India, on MCX in 2024.
BRICS is more than politics and economics. The group has become so effective at fostering civil and cooperative international relations that it has now taken on a cultural significance. The first edition of the BRICS Plus Fashion Summit, organized under the auspices of the Moscow Fashion Week, has emerged as a hub for commercial dealings between prominent industry figures, specialists, journalists, designers, and emerging brands from all over the world.
Clay loves facts. So Clay, you know that I showed you this chart in September and October. And the chart here was a historic cycle, was a private cycle that God showed me on the pressure, on the movement that the US dollar is going to do. And then the cycle right in the middle here is the US dollar. And then for you, Clay, I just added this in about an hour, not even 15 minutes ago, before we jumped into this podcast. I added gold in for you here. The point I want to make is, this is so important, because Babylon, right here, what you're looking at, it's called Mystery Babylon, because orchestrators of Babylon work in the shadows, right? So they pull the strings, the purse strings of all political leaders, school board officials, people in Hollywood. The list goes on and on and on, including the people that run these mega churches. Okay, all purse strings are being pulled by what? The U.S. dollar. So Babylon was built with the U.S. dollar. Nixon took us off the gold standard. They create money out of thin air. We went from millions in the 70s, which if you wanted to count to 1 million, it would take you, Marty, 12 days and not sleeping. Okay. Now, Marty, if I asked you to count to a quadrillion, so we went to from millions to 1,000 million is a billion, 1,000 billion is a trillion, and 1,000 trillion is a quadrillion. We're in the quadrillions now. So if I ask you to count to a quadrillion, it would take you 31 million years not sleeping.
Well, that's why Marty's going to leave here at 420 to get started. 421, 422. He's got to get started. Now, I want to be real quick here, Bo. Real quick. I want to make sure people see this. The one thing about Bo that Bo does is he always shows up here and he brings facts that I like to see. Let's go back to you, Bo.
What's coming is two things, okay? When Babylon falls, we're talking this in a second. When Babylon falls, two things happen. The greatest move of precious metals in human history. And number two, the greatest revival in human history.
That's it.
So that is why you need prayer, because you need to know who God the Father is, his Son, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit. Because why? What's coming is a great shaking. You see, across the globe, I would say 90% plus people sit on the fence. Okay, like, they know religion, but it's just, but again, all religions are man-made. What's the truth is Jesus Christ. Okay, that's why you can go on national TV, you can talk God all you want, but don't say Jesus. Yeah. Because Jesus defines what God you are praying to. That's the crux of everything, right? And so again, the two things that are going to happen is the greatest move of precious metals in human history. Why? Third seal of Revelation, financial rebalancing. And the second thing is the greatest revival in human history. They go hand in hand with the what? The fall of mystery, Babylon. So we are at that point in time. We're about to see it go down here. This was the chart that I showed you, Clay. I added gold here on this chart. And the reason was I wanted to show you this chart that God revealed to me is 3 years old. In other words, it's 3 years accurate. But the chart itself is so far 3 years accurate. In other words, here in February at point A, it predicted the exact bottom for the US dollar. It predicted the US dollar would rise into October, point B, of the year 2022 last year. And then it predicted that there'd be 3 drops in the dollar. And you'll notice the chart in the middle here is the US dollar. So the US dollar is mimicking the historic chart here perfectly. You got to say that it's not even 90+% accurate is not the truth, because this is 90+% accurate. And the blue arrow, and this is when I was on your show here, Clay, at letter E, Edwards, end of September into October. What was I saying? The US dollar is finished. I use the word finished, and it's got a down cycle for years. Okay. So what happened? It was 100% right.
But right now, I would do my best to get your head out of you know what and stop working hard and saving this stuff here. This is fake. This is fake. This is real. And this is real. Good luck to you all. Start going for real money, not fake money. Thank you.
The cycle, like I said, cycles precede events. The cycle was 100% accurate because look in the middle chart. From point E, look what's happened. The US dollar has been dropping ever since. What a coincidence. What I say, the US dollar is opposite gold. Oh, what just happened on December 1, Friday? The gold made a new all-time historic high on Friday, December 1. Now, this is the fun part. So let's look. So at point A, you'll see that when the dollar's low and then it goes up into point B, the dollar gains strength. The world is buying it. So the world was buying the dollar into point B into October of 2022, while the world was selling gold into point B. You see how point B is opposite. The dollar and gold are opposite.
Yeah. Now,
what the chart is saying is that the dollar's got a down cycle for years. So guess which direction gold and silver are going for years.
Now, if you could pull that chart again here, Bo,
Yes.
Artie, you can maybe discern with this because,
E is the hot spot. Basically, Bo's just saying after E is going to be the rest of the alphabet, which means the dollar is going down and gold's going up. I mean,
Bo, do you believe that's going to happen? You actually believe that's going to happen, Bo? Because again, Bo, I mean, you hopped on the show. You said, Clay, gold's going to hit an all-time high, and it just did.
Yeah.
So on as far as mega points, which is how I keep track of non-spiritual points that are not redeemable in this life or the afterlife, Bo did score a point. He was the first guy on the show to say, Clay, gold's going to hit an all-time high, and it just happened. So, Bo, I've given you a mega point. Boop, boop. Bo also is the first guy I know that said Roe versus Wade would be overturned, and it happened.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, these charts, though, confuse people. And I think people, so I'm just making sure we're obsessing on this chart.
It's a tri-chart. It's 3 charts. It's really
It's a lot going on there. So, Bo, back to you, sir.
Right. And then also, remember, we was at the end of September, the same time we were talking about the US dollar being finished in the end of September, I said, watch the first week of October because something is going to go down, potentially a war. Oh, what a coincidence. The war broke out on exactly the 7th of October to the mark. And we talked about that a week before on your show, Clay. So what I'm saying is that I don't want glory for anything that I'm doing. God reveals things to me. He's before he ever does things on the earth, he speaks through his servants. Okay, so Marty knows that. Okay, these are scriptural things. God's not going to destroy the U.S., allow the destruction of the U.S. dollar before he reveals these secrets on what he's going to do. Now, you have had numerous people on your show, Marty, prophetic words, and also Marty as well, too. Marty, I'm sure you've had some prophetic words about a wealth transfer that's coming, okay? Because what is the wealth transfer? It's what? Have you?
Time out. So you think there's going to be a wealth transfer? Are you saying this, Marty? Are you guys both in agreement? Is this something that could happen? What are your thoughts? I'm going to take up my electric shaver and do some shaving just for a second. Just
really
as
good background music.
Yeah. Okay.
So I do believe there's going to be a wealth transfer. Number one, the word says it. And number two, I've heard of other ministers, men and women of God, yes, even women, both say that they're going to be this is taking place. And according to the trigraph, the most powerful charts I've ever seen,
trigraph
after E, I'm telling you, I'm thinking we're getting in this.
You do? So you guys are optimistic for some kind of wealth transfer. That's what you two are saying.
Well, Bo's got nice hair.
He does.
December is going to be fantastic. Clay, December is going to be fantastic on what's about to go down. So we just had gold break vertical. Okay. As we're talking Bitcoin, which you know that I've been involved in for years in my cycles, I use those charts I showed you for Bitcoin, and they've been beyond crazy accurate. I got in Bitcoin at under $400. Why? Because I knew the cycles of what's going to be coming. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that Bitcoin right now is toying with almost $40,000. I bought it at 400. Okay. And this is just a warm up of what's coming yet now into next year. What I'm saying is the great wealth transfer is there in the simplest definition. The great wealth transfer is biblically the wealth of the sinner is stored up for the righteous. Okay, so that's Proverbs 13:22. So that's where it's in the Bible. How we're going to physically see it manifest while you were watching, what it is the fall of mystery Babylon, because they built Babylon with the U.S. dollar. So what you're going to see is the fall of the dollar and the explosion. And when I say fall of the dollar will lose its status as the world's reserve currency. This is the critical part of it. The loss of the status of the world reserve currency on the U.S. dollar will cause a biblical explosion, which is Matthew 30, 60, 100-fold. Like you've seen in Bitcoin from 400 to 40,000. You're going to see this happen in God's money, gold and silver. That's the great wealth transfer, because the U.S. dollar will lose its status as the world's reserve currency, and we're going to see multiplication of God's money. Haggai 2 verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. So that's why Bitcoin's ready to go. Silver and gold, all of these things are going to explode because they are the opposite trade of the U.S. dollar chart I just showed you.
Beverly Hills Precious Metals Exchange is a client-focused firm devoted to assisting our clients with precious metals. Our clients range from first-time to serious coin collectors and investors seeking to add precious metals to their investment portfolios. We are not interested in volatile investments, leveraged products, and intangible assets. With rising inflation and the devaluing of the dollar hurting middle-class families, investing in gold and silver ensures protection for your hard-earned money. Save the value of your money today by investing in gold and silver at Beverly Hills Precious Metals.
And we're going to see multiplication of God's money. Haggai 2 verse 8, the silver and the gold are mine, saith the Lord. Silver and gold, all of these things are going to explode because they are the opposite trade of the U.S. dollar. Back to the chart I just showed you.
Now, my wife and I, we have been consistently buying precious metals from bh-pm.com. We used to buy back in the day from a company called goldline.com. So I've been doing that because a buddy of mine who owned a bank, I went to him and I said, hey, what should I do with my money as I grow my companies? He said, take a quarter of your wealth by precious metals, take a quarter of your wealth by real estate from emotional people. And I've just been very consistent doing that since 2005, 6, 7, et cetera. I don't think the average person's been buying precious metals.
I don't think they are. No.
I don't think so. I'm just saying, how could this possibly, Bo, be a good thing for America when the average person, I understand that I have a bunch of precious metals I purchased. And so yesterday I was excited to watch that move up because that's a benefit for me. When I bought precious metals, a lot of the gold was like $400 an ounce. And now it's, over $2,000 an ounce. But for the average person, I don't see this as a good thing when they go to get groceries, Bo. How is this a good thing in your mind?
It's a great question, Clay, and my answer is very simple to you, okay? What the world has done, and Marty can confirm this, or at least I hope he does, because the world itself chases finances. They chase money, not intentionally, but what's happened is Babylon itself has created a fake money system. It went from the millions to the quadrillions, and now we've got mortgages, student loans. The world's got mortgages, student loans, car loans, credit cards. It's just everybody is enslaved. And so my question, back to you, but specifically is, if the dollar crashes, you're right, it's going to be the food chain is going to get just obliterated for a while. Okay. So there's going to be run on the food supply because people are going to want food because the dollar itself crashed. And so the wiring system, the banks are going to go down because when silver explodes, what you're going to see is the banking system collapse. Going to repeat that. When silver explodes, Marty and Clay, the banking system will collapse, which is going to cause what? A disruption in the credit card. There's going to be the credit cards are all going to get screwed up. You're not going to be able to use credit cards to pay for things. You're not going to use the Fed wiring system to send wires. So the food supply chain is going to get all messed up. And more importantly, the banks go down. People are going to, when you understand what a deposit is, when you make a deposit into a bank, Clay, when you make a deposit into a bank, you become a creditor of the bank. Basically, you're the last guy in line getting your money back.
It's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and the primary regulators when these things happen. And there may be some other prices, this is similar to what Jay was saying, in the market that you can tell whether people understand who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected.
It should be accessible when people need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like, my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people that'll charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out.
What part of that would be most helpful to boost confidence? I do think that the OLF and using it is the big gift. It's not a gift, but the big tool that we need in Title II to help provide confidence. But what do people need to know to really get that? How important is it to explain the rules and the mechanics for the OLF? How money will get from point A to point B. How would we use targeted guarantees to allay concerns about excess cash use? There's a lot of questions here. And so, there are a lot of things we've been thinking about, and what we want to hear from you today is what you think the priorities would be in order to go about setting expectations appropriately in public about how we would execute Title II, so that if and when we do have to have that announcement on Friday night, ideally Friday night, that people are in a position to receive it, understand it, and say, yeah, that works. And we can see how this will happen. Of course, there will be doubters, but there's a lot of things going on.
When the banks have a massive issue, the Frank Dodd Act, when the banks have a massive financial issue, you're the last one in line to get your money out. And so people are going to lose millions upon billions within the banking institution. They're going to lose their funds. Millionaires are going to lose everything. Billionaires are going to lose. People are going to lose enormous amounts of money. But why? And this is my question back to you, Marty. When God takes you to your knees, who do you find?
You find God. And I see exactly where you're going. And as soon as you started this, that's exactly where my heart went, because man has basically sought money. And that's what you've been saying. Man has worshiped. Could we say it even became an idol? Well, God said, you're going to have no other God before me. So guess what's going to be happening for me? I'm going to get real busy. I got some serious job security with all these people that are now going to have to turn to God, and they're going to look for someone to help them. We're going to be here helping them learn how to pray through the famine, pray through the desolate times, pray through the wars and rumors of wars. And so, yeah, it's an interesting time coming. It really is. It's a time where people will have to turn to God.
America's economy is going to go the way of Blockbuster. That's what I think. The Blockbuster sign is now here. You can see here, if you zoom in here, our good friends at Highwayman Signs are installing this for us. It's high quality Blockbuster sign. Since the age of like 12, I've always wanted one, and it's finally here. What? That's what I'm seeing. I mean, I don't see, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, Bo, that's what I see. You got the final 4 minutes here, Bo. So feel free to land the plane. But what I'm saying, I'm on the record right here. Here we go. I'm seeing America's economy going the way of Blockbuster Video, which, by the way, folks, Blockbuster Video, there is one left in Oregon. And I know this because we took the Reawaken America tour to Oregon, and there people tell me, hey, there is a Blockbuster, buddy. Wow. So there is one Blockbuster left. Okay, so here we go. Bo, back to you.
So Mystery Babylon is based on a fake fraudulent money system, specifically once to take us off the gold standard. We're 50 years, since Nixon took us off the gold standard. And then we have, the death right now of Kissinger. So we're at a 50-year mark. We know we're at a 50-year mark because why? The Yom Kippur War. It's 50 years to the mark. So we had confirmation of the 50-year Jubilee cycle with the Yom Kippur War, which was in 73. 50 years, 2023. All of this is at the doorstep right now of what's about to go down. And again, when does God show up? At the very last minute. And so, like I've said before in all podcasts, from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, it's called the winter crux. The winter crux is the shortest day of the year. We're heading into that on the 21st of December. Mark my words, the US dollar is going to plunge, okay, as the year ends and into next year, 2024. The US dollar will lose the status of the world reserve currency. The current financial stock markets are going to have the rug pulled out from underneath it. It's all happy, joy, joy until the rug gets pulled out from underneath it and the market suddenly collapse, okay? We're potentially supposed to see a 30% market crash in the stock market in the month of December. The point I'm trying to make is this is a third seal of revelation. It's a financial rebalancing, because what was written on the wall when Babylon fell, remember Belshazzar, the Mene Tekel offshore scene? This was the fall of Babylon. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Your kingdom has come to an end. And then it suddenly collapsed. Belshazzar died that night. Darius took over, and Babylon fell that night in 24 hours. God only needs how long? 24 hours. December is going to be historic, and 2024 starts off Psalm 24. Psalm 24 is year 2024, which is specifically blessings 30, 60, 100-fold, and vindication.
Yeah. Now, Bo, your website, if people want to follow you, what's the website people can go to there, Bo?
Gold2020forecast.com.
Gold 2020 forecast, gold2020forecast.com. We got that, gold2020forecast.com. Also, folks, we want to get out of the fiat currency and into precious metals. I would highly recommend you schedule a free consultation with bh-pm.com or another precious metals service that you can trust. Bo, thank you for working with my crazy schedule today. We'll talk to you soon.
God bless.
China and Brazil have completed their first bilateral trade using local currency. The move joins a host of other countries moving away from the US dollar in a shift of the global economic balance. According to the Bank of China, the transaction marks a milestone in trade relations between Beijing and Brasilia after a deal was reached in April. The new process of using the Chinese yuan in exchange for the Brazilian real is set to open doors for companies to expand business. Well, we spoke to a pair of guests on the matter who suggest that other nations will continue to move away from the current global reserve currency.
What's going to happen? How long can we keep this up, Andy? How long can people keep taking this piece of garbage here that we print at will?
I don't think much longer at all. I mean, look, just in this year alone, the BRICS countries have offloaded $123 billion in U.S. treasuries. China and Brazil and India, the United Arab Emirates, all of our supposed allies of the past, well, minus China, although we had a good relationship with them for a long time, they're dumping the bonds. And there are countries that are working very hard to strike deals with one another outside the dollar. And as we continue to print at a pace that is unsustainable, while rates are going higher, we are putting such strain on the entire system. The whole system's going to be dragged down, and maybe that's what they're intending to do. But maybe that's why, and it's not just the wealthiest traders in the world, that being the central banks, it's the most sophisticated and well-informed, continue to buy gold at a pace that the world has never seen over the last 18 months, more than they have ever seen. And every month, it's bigger than the last. They know what's coming. And this is a very big deal, and it must be done methodically, not too quick to cut off your nose to spite your face. But there will come a point, and I call it logarithmic decay, little by little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once. It's like going over the falls. Well, we're seeing the little by little by little by little by little. Every interview that you and I have done, we've talked more about the little by little by little by little by little. Where are we in this logarithmic decay where we hit the falls? Don't know, but we will hit that. And I think that's what you're so good at showing people, is the little by little by little by little. And when the all at once comes, when none of us know, when it probably on a Sunday night, if you're not prepared, not just with gold and silver, in every way, I think it's going to be a very, let's call it a religious experience, and one that I don't think will be very pleasant for the majority of the people who don't see what's coming and therefore have not and cannot get out of the way.
Last question, about 30 seconds. What's CBDC going to do when the Fed goes to the Fed coin? What happens then?
Well, I think in order to get to the CBDC, you have to create an event. And that event could be the loss of the petrodollar and everyone dumping dollars, which creates hyperinflation. As the dollars hit our shores and inflation goes straight up and interest rates go straight up to compensate, not controlled by the Fed, but by the market, and everything collapses. But have no fear. Lael Brainerd and her central bank digital currency, the #2 economic advisor to the U.S. White House, modern monetary theorist who ran point on Fed Now and also worked with MIT in establishing the CBDC. I think you will create an event where people will beg for it because they will have watched the banking system implode. CBDCs will be the end of privacy and will be the ability for the Federal Reserve to create both monetary and fiscal policy right to the end user. And it's what they want, and it is coming. And the Bank of International Settlement said every country must have an operational one by 2025. It's coming. And I think that's another thing to be prepared for. Get out of the matrix. Own things that have no counterparty risk, like gold and silver.
That's why I own this. This is silver and gold.
Yeah, there'll come a time where they'll say, you got 90 days to turn this in. And if you don't, it's worthless. And now you get your new CBDC. When does that happen? Don't know. How does it happen? I don't know. But they will have an event that makes people want to take it. Because the majority of the people that I talk to and listen to you, they don't want to take it unless they have no choice. And that event, the banking system blowing up, everything blowing up, here, will make you whole. Just sign on the dotted line.
Of our currency. I'm talking about our currency being used throughout the world.
You want it to remain. You want the dollar to remain the world's reserve currency.
Well, I think it's bigger than losing any war. Mm-hmm. I think if it doesn't, look, we are already reverting to third world status in many ways. You look at our airports, you look at our terminals, you look at our filthy roads and broken roads and everything else. We're like a third world country. We have something that's very powerful, and that's our dollar all over. But you take a look at what's happening to it now with other countries not using it. And you know China wants to replace it with the yuan. And it was unthinkable with us. Unthinkable. Would never have happened. Now people are thinking about it. That could happen.
BRICS nations have the oil. They have their natural resources. They don't have to put up with it. And they're not going to put up with it. And remember, 2/3 of those hombres are not buddies, not friends of this constitutional republic we have. They're our enemies or rubbing up on our enemies.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States. Now, what is this action, which is very technical, what does it mean for you? Let me lay to rest the bugaboo of what is called devaluation. If you want to buy a foreign car or take a trip abroad, market conditions may cause your dollar to buy slightly less. But if you are among the overwhelming majority of Americans who buy American-made products in America, your dollar will be worth just as much tomorrow as it is today.
A decline in the value of the dollar is necessary in order to compensate for the fact that the U.S. economy will remain rather weak, will be a drag on the global economy. China will emerge as the motor replacing the U.S. consumer. And of course, it's a smaller motor because the Chinese economy is much smaller. So the world economy will have less of a motor. So it will move forward slower than it has in the last 25 years. But China will be the engine driving it forward, and the U.S. will be actually a drag that's being pulled along through a gradual decline in the value of the dollar. So there would be a slow decline in the value of the dollar, a managed decline. And that would be the adjustment that it needs to be accomplished.